Session number 10, Dynamic DNS. Our objectives for today are understanding dynamic DNS operation, get familiar with the software dynamic DNS solution, and learning how to configure the dynamic DNS service for managed embedded NGX appliances. Dynamic DNS. A computer's unique public IP address is required in order to access a computer via the Internet. In most cases, a computer's public IP address is assigned by an Internet service provider, and the majority of ISPs assign dynamic rather than static IP addresses to their subscribers. If a network gateway is assigned a dynamic IP address, then each time the gateway connects to the ISP, its IP address may change. Problem: public web servers must be installed with a static IP address. VPN gateways must be installed with a static IP address for secure VPN operations. It is difficult to access gateways for remote configuration since their IP address changes constantly. Purchasing a static IP address may be costly, and in some regions it is not commonly available. The solution: SMP's Dynamic Domain Name System service solves this problem by allowing you to assign domain names to gateways. Static DNS operation. Computer can be assigned a domain name, unique text name corresponding to a numeric IP address of a computer on the Internet. When an Internet user attempts to access a public website using the site's domain name, a domain name service translates the domain name to a relevant IP address and enables the user to connect to the desired website. Domain names are helpful because they provide a readable and easy-to-remember reference of IP addresses. However, the standard DNS cannot map a domain name to a dynamic IP address, since dynamic IP addresses change. Dynamic DNS operation. Dynamic DNS is the acceptable solution in cases where static IP addresses are too expensive or impossible to obtain. Internet service that allows assigning and mapping domain names to dynamic IP addresses. Hosts with dynamic IP addresses are installed with a custom software dynamic DNS client that reports the host's current IP address to the dynamic DNS server. Dynamic DNS server uses the received information to update the mapping of hosts' domain names to their current IP addresses. It actually enables the users to connect to public servers without tracking the server's changing IP addresses. Dynamic DNS solution. SMS can function as a dynamic DNS server for safe-at-office security appliances, acting as dynamic DNS clients. There is no need to install additional software or settings on the network hosts or on the appliance. This offers advantages for both gateway owners and service providers. For one, single point of contact for dynamic DNS services. Also, provide DDNS as a subscription-based service. Service providers can assign an unlimited number of aliases for each gateway in the SMP database. Dynamic DNS service also supports email address resolving DNS MX records. MX, Mail Exchange Record, is a type of resource record that specifies to which server's internet email should be sent. Allow the service provider to assign email addresses to customers under their own dynamic DNS domain. With the Dynamic DNS service, owners of safe-at-office appliances installed with dynamic IP address can do the following. External users can access a web server behind the appliance. Remote access VPN users are able to communicate with the safe-at-office VPN server using the domain name, even if the gateway's IP changes frequently. Administrators can remotely access their safe-at-office appliance for maintenance. Safe-at-office appliance users receive emails through their internal business email server and under their own domain, without any need for configuration changes on their ISP's DNS server. Safe-at-office appliance users receive emails through their internal business email server and under their own domain, without any need for configuration changes on their ISP's DNS server. Other Internet tools can only be used if you have a static IP address, while DDNS enables you to use those tools with a dynamic IP address. Dynamic name resolution example. In this example, safe-at-office security appliance is connected to the SMP and subscribed to the dynamic DNS service. The domain suffix chosen, registered, and configured by the service provider is mydomain.com. The safe-at-office appliance alias in the database is John. MX record resolution example. In this example, Safety Office appliance is connected to the SMP and subscribed to the dynamic DNS service. The domain suffix chosen, registered, and configured by the service provider is mydomain.com. Safety Office appliance alias is John. Safety Office appliance owner uses the email service hosted at the ISP. The mail server address is mail.myisp.com. A mailbox user is defined on the mail server under the name of marketing. User attempts to send an email to marketing@john.mydomain.com. Email client makes a DNS query requesting the MX record for the recipient's domain name. In our example, the domain name is john.mydomain.com. SMP returns list of mail servers that accept incoming mails for the domain, primary, and backup. Email client attempts to establish an SMTP connection to the mail server that has to be installed with a marketing@john.mydomain.com mailbox. Configuration. Dynamic DNS configuration. Steps. Register a public domain name suffix. Enable the DRM module. Configure the portal to handle the selected domain suffix. Enable the dynamic DNS service in plans. Configure dynamic DNS aliases for gateways. Configure mail server. In order for the SMP to act as a dynamic DNS server, it has to be registered as the authoritative name server for the specific domain chosen by the service provider. For example, this concludes session number 11. Please take the time to complete lab number 11. Please join us for session number 12, Dynamic VPN.